People, what's a dirty little secret about an industry that you have worked in that people outside the industry really should know? I worked at Alta Sciences, a preclinical testing facility where they determine safe medication dosages before human trials, using rats, mice, dogs, and other animals. They like to frame it as necessary evil and claim they do their best for the animals, but the reality is far from it. The place is a disaster, painting over mold and literal feces, mold in the ceilings, machines constantly breaking with no real repairs, and bad procedures being hidden from visitors. Leadership protects people who outright abuse the animals, while employees pay the price for management's poor decisions, losing perks as a result. Regulatory bodies like IACUC, FDA, and USDA are practically useless. Inspections come with enough warning for the facility to put on a superficial cleanup, and the majority of reported issues are ignored. The only change that came from my reports was cleaning the chemical barrel room. Everything else remained the same. Even reporting concerns is a frustrating, exhausting process. Any so-called fixes are half-hearted, done by unqualified people, and inevitably break again. There are employees who genuinely care about the animals and the research, but corporate greed and burnout make it an impossible environment. And to top it off, the pay is terrible. Before we continue, do us a quick favor. Smash that like button and subscribe to support our channel. Story 2. Former aircraft fueler here. Please, don't check your pets in kennels, especially during summer or winter. They're exposed to harsh conditions, often left on belt loaders in the scorching heat right next to a running APU, auxiliary power unit. That's loud enough to hurt human ears, let alone a dog's. It's heartbreaking. I always felt so bad for them. American Airlines will wreck your luggage. It gets overloaded on carts, falls off on the way to the plane, and ends up getting run over by tankers and fuel trucks, rained on, and left out overnight. Meanwhile, you're at your destination wondering where your bags are. If your flight is delayed, chances are it's because of us, the fuelers. Look out the window. If it's a small plane, check the right side. If it's a larger plane, check the left side. If you see a truck under the wing, we're the reason you're late. Sorry about that. Edit. Just to clarify, I don't know what happens to the pets once they're on the flight. I've only seen them left in kennels on belt loaders in the heat next to engines. I worked as a fueler at DFW International for 6 years, so my knowledge is limited to what I've seen at my station. I strongly advise against checking pets if you can avoid it, but beyond that, I can't offer much more advice. Some people who worked for the airlines may have better insight. Second edit. I want to clarify that pets in kennels aren't always left outside. It doesn't happen every day, and it's not just American Airlines. It's just that I fueled more American flights than others. But I've seen it happen enough times to feel the need to speak out. Story 3. Healthcare homemaker here. If your grandparent or parent is receiving in-home care, it's important to know that they could be living in a cockroach-infested house and still not be forced to move if they don't want to. It's not the responsibility of the care company to ensure your loved one has a safe living environment. It's up to the family. They can try to persuade, but they can't force any changes. Why do I know this? Because I've been to a home where an 80-year-old woman lives surrounded by cockroaches. I have a client with a mental illness who once put bleach in their dog's water to help with its breath. I've visited a client who never cleans their cat box, and another whose ceiling is caving in. I've reported these issues, but the company's response has always been the same. There's nothing we can do. It's up to the family. It's heartbreaking because there are so many family members who don't seem to care about the condition their loved ones are living in. Sure, they might visit, but do they clean the litter box? Do they check for cockroaches or ensure the house is safe? No. They say they care and love the person, but don't take the steps to ensure they're living in a healthy environment. It worries me because I can't help but imagine my own mother in a deteriorating mental state with no family to support her. She could end up in a run-down, cockroach-infested house just because she was stubborn enough. It's frustrating because, while the client has rights, should they really have the right to live in a place that risks their health? Or put their caregivers at risk, too? Edit. I've never been directly told by my company that I am obligated to report these situations to Adult Protective Services, APS. They just told me to call them, and we'll work it out. They've never given me phone numbers for APS or animal abuse hotlines. I'm only 20 and still new to this job, so I'm still learning how the healthcare system works. I also understand there are different perspectives. I know that many elderly or mentally ill people can be incredibly stubborn and refuse help. I care for these individuals regularly and hear about these challenges often. I'm not dismissing those struggles, but I wrote this post when I was feeling overwhelmed by work. I've also met many families who truly care and go above and beyond for their loved ones, and I want to acknowledge and thank all of you. We need more of that in the world. Story 4. I own a sign shop, and I can tell you with 100% certainty that almost all businesses fail within the first year. If you think you are going to open a restaurant or a boutique, you are about to lose a bunch of money. Also, no matter what business you want to start, go talk to your local sign guy and ask how many businesses have been in that location and failed. Trust me, we know which locations are cursed. Story 5. I work in large-scale construction, where major developers essentially finance their projects using the credit of their subcontractors. Billion-dollar companies expect smaller businesses to cover costs up front with only a promise of payment down the line. The larger the developer, the slower the payment process. If a project fails, it's the subcontractors who take the hit. Developers protect themselves by structuring their LLCs to be project-specific, meaning they have no real assets to seize, leaving the smaller companies out of luck. Story 6. I work in the medical field, but this is more about an adjacent industry, health insurance. Claims are reviewed by people who often have little to no clinical knowledge. Their job isn't to assess medical necessity. It's to find specific keywords that justify denying coverage. Because of this, I'm careful about what I include in clinical notes. If something isn't directly relevant to the treatment, I leave it out. Experience has taught me that even a single word can be twisted into a reason to label a treatment inappropriate and deny the claim. Story 7. I work in insurance. If you call to request an estimate for a claim, the company will record it as a $0 claim if they decide the damage isn't significant enough to repair. Even though no payout is made, this still goes on your record. When another insurer reviews your history, it can impact your future rates or even make you ineligible for coverage. Always get a third-party inspector to assess the damage first. Don't go to your insurance company for an estimate right away. Story 8. I know a dark secret. The company I used to work for owns a food production and processing plant in Bridgeton, Missouri, just outside St. Louis. While they are a private label supplier for some of the largest food brands in the U.S., most people wouldn't recognize their name. But I can tell you that their products are probably in your kitchen right now. If you're familiar with Bridgeton, you might know it was featured in HBO's Atomic Homefront documentary. Why is this concerning? The plant is located less than a mile from the West Lake Bridgeton landfill, which has been burning underground for years, and is slowly moving closer to an adjacent radioactive waste super site where remnants of the Manhattan Project were disposed of. The surrounding community, including areas near Coldwater Creek, has seen alarming rates of cancer and other illnesses for decades, likely due to contaminated groundwater. And this is just one manufacturer in an industrial area crowded with others, too many to count. I'm not one for conspiracy theories, but it's hard to ignore the fact that we're all being exposed to toxic risks daily from companies like this and others like DuPont. Story 9. In a lot of cases, the fancier the marketing, the messier the management. At one of my jobs, the company was looking for a project management platform to help with scheduling and to address concerns about slow turnaround times. I recommended an alternative to Basecamp that integrated better with our existing apps and would allow us to set up an on-site server for secure management. I knew that too many middle managers were the cause of most of the delays, so when I pitched this software, I intentionally left out the activity tracker. After the first quarter of use, I printed out the tracker timeline, which showed large blue bars representing weeks of delays in the middle management review process. Rather than streamlining the review process, their solution was to hire even more middle managers, which only worsened the issue. Their next move was to switch to Basecamp, which didn't track the same way. Edit. The software I used was Reich. Hey Reich, feel free to send me some compensation for spreading the word. Story 10. I worked at a Marriott for several years and learned a few things along the way. Bed bugs happen more often than you'd think. Unfortunately, there's not much we can do about it. Hotels with frequent international travelers are bound to occasionally get someone who unknowingly brings them in their luggage. When it happens, we can only quarantine the room and clean it thoroughly. Those sheets are probably not as clean as you imagine. They're changed between guests, but hotel laundry processes can sometimes be rushed or not as thorough as you'd expect. If you're in the middle of anything private in your room, people in the hallway can likely hear you, especially if you're not using headphones. This includes any adult entertainment. Always flip the bolt lock on your door. Mistakes happen with bookings and room assignments. I've lost count of how many times a room has been double booked, leading to some really awkward or angry situations. If something goes wrong or you're upset about a booking, speak up. Be polite but firm, and you can often get free food, drinks, or even a free night's stay. Hotels want to avoid bad reviews, so they'll go out of their way to make it right. At the hotel I worked at, anything lower than a 9 or 10 rating was considered a 0, so don't hesitate to ask for compensation. Lastly, we can smell the smoke and weed from your room, both while you're staying and after you leave. While we might not always be able to do anything immediately, you will absolutely be charged for the 1 to 2 extra nights the room will be unavailable for cleaning. Please, stop smoking in the rooms. You're the only one who can't smell it. We know when you're lying, so just stop being childish. Story 11. The education system in America is in a bad place, largely because of contracted employees. I work for an organization called Solient, which owns 4 different staffing companies in special education. We place special education teachers, speech pathologists, school psychologists, paraprofessionals, and others in schools. We pay our employees just 60% of what we charge the schools. On an hourly basis, it's slightly more than what a government employee could make, but we keep that margin razor thin. Our executives claim we're doing good work, but in reality, we're siphoning off hundreds of millions of dollars from educators and schools. We even pay lobbying firms to maintain this status quo, since special education is federally funded. We're not the only company doing this, but my organization is particularly bad because we have 4 sister companies that work together to drive up prices. Our parent company doesn't care which of our companies makes the money, so we end up bidding against ourselves to inflate costs. Story 12. Here's a peek into the engagement ring business. Many of the natural diamonds you buy have already been in 2 to 3 rings before they end up in yours. Rings today are designed with more fragile features than in the past, because when they break or need constant repairs, you'll end up buying a new one, which means more money for us. This is also why modern trends lean toward dainty and minimalistic designs with huge stones. They're essentially ticking time bombs. Additionally, many jewelry stores won't stop you from buying stones that are too soft for daily wear. Looking at you, Opal. The largest diamond distributor? Walmart. Diamonds that suppliers discard for being ugly often end up on sites like James Allen and Brilliant Earth. Platinum isn't necessarily better than gold. In fact, it has just as many, though different, flaws. We market it as superior because it's way more expensive. It's illegal for jewelry stores to claim something is made of diamonds and gold if it's not, but these laws don't apply to Etsy sellers. The average woman's ring size is a 6, so we typically sell rings in sizes 6.5 to 7, so we can tell you, wow, you're smaller than average. The people who beat up their rings the most? Nurses, teachers, and office workers. Story 13. I work in shipping, and there are absolutely no issues in the industry at all. Here's a list of things that don't happen anywhere. No illegal pollution. No illegal emissions. No corruption, bribery, or misconduct from any port or government officials, pilots, agents, or even Suez boatmen. No companies disregarding health, safety, or pollution rules in the name of saving money. And no racism, bigotry, nepotism, or any form of discrimination. No incompetent individuals with fake certifications and sea service, willing to do anything for cheap companies that ignore international regulations. Overall, it's great that oil and gas majors have stepped back from direct ship management, allowing honest, dedicated third-party management companies to handle everything at lower costs while still maintaining high standards. Story 14. I used to work for Autoclore, and so went into just about every restaurant in the city to climb under the dishwasher. Everyone has roaches, mice, and rats. What does get me is the amount of first-generation run ethnic food places that you see some dude prepping fish crouched on a concrete floor while smoking a cigarette. Seriously, some of the cleanest kitchens are some of the chain joints. Story 15. I used to be a political campaign manager and staffer in political offices. The U.S. government is essentially controlled by an invisible network of interconnected staffers. While the good elected officials are informed, it's the staffers who are doing the heavy lifting. They write bills, create bill summaries, research the issues, and even craft the speeches that elected officials deliver. Without these staffers, most elected officials wouldn't have the slightest clue about what's really going on, and staffers have an absurd amount of influence over the information that shapes their platforms. On the campaign side, the reason third-party candidates struggle to gain traction in the U.S. is because running a campaign is incredibly complicated, ridiculously expensive, and time-consuming. Even candidates running for state legislature can't do it all alone, which is why so many align with a party. Only the ultra-wealthy can afford to run their own successful campaigns, and even they typically need party infrastructure just to access the competent manpower needed to run a competitive campaign. Our first-past-the-post voting system essentially guarantees a two-party system, because elections are so challenging for individuals or small party groups to effectively campaign in. Story 16. I work in a pharmacy, currently at a specialty pharmacy dealing with complex, expensive, and rare medications, but I've also had experience in retail. Medical professionals, whether they're doctors, pharmacists, or nurse practitioners, are just as human and fallible as anyone else. I've met some of the most clueless people in this field. The difference is, because they have expensive, time-consuming degrees, they are often the most confidently wrong people you'll encounter. I've had arguments over things that should be basic knowledge, like basic math. For weeks is 28 days, not 30, come on. I've had a doctor shout at me, insisting that prednisone is an antibiotic instead of azithromycin. Yes, really. I've also had pharmacists who thought the COVID vaccine was a liberal conspiracy while they were giving out 40-plus vaccines a day. To sum it up, they're people. They're subject to the same biases, poor judgment, and personality flaws as everyone else. They're still your best option when it comes to medical advice, but don't assume they're infallible. Ask questions, do your research, and don't hesitate to find a second opinion if your doctor isn't cutting it. A bad doctor is one of the worst things you can deal with. And let's be honest, doctors can sometimes be pretty arrogant. They've endured a grueling medical school process, which seems to inflate their egos. Not all doctors, not all the time, but it's definitely a noticeable pattern. Story 17. Nurses and doctors are often overwhelmed with too many patients, and nurses are on the front lines, tasked with alerting doctors to any critical changes in a patient's condition. Ideally, a nurse should have no more than 4 stable patients, but it's common for them to be assigned 6 to 8, with some of those patients being very ill. We strongly encourage you to read our /nursing to get an honest look at the dangerous realities of being a patient in the hospital. The medical industry often paints a picture of calm with soothing music, pleasant staff, and glossy websites, but behind the scenes, we are all scrambling to prevent errors. Long shifts and overwhelming stress increase the likelihood of mistakes, which can lead to patient deaths, many of which could have been avoided if staffing levels were better. The industry claims there aren't enough nurses, and while that's partly true, we've encountered many situations where hospitals could safely staff more. We've even had coworkers offer to work extra shifts, only to be declined. Unfortunately, the focus of the medical system is on profits, with big salaries for CEOs and upper management who answer to shareholders, not to you, the patients. It's a dangerous time to be a patient. Please, educate yourselves by reading nurses' comments, especially those marked vent. They often reveal the stress and risks nurses face during dangerous shifts. Story 18. When an app pops up with a "Do you like this app?" thing, the yes button goes to the App Store for a review, the no button goes to an internal complaint process. This on average filters upset customers away from the App Store and artificially raises app score by a whole star on average. That is the only way most corporate service apps have 4 stars. Story 19. As an auto insurance agent, please, for the love of God, don't share more information than necessary. When we ask you a question, just answer with yes or no, and keep it simple. The more you elaborate, the more likely you are to accidentally say something that could raise your rate or even get you declined. We genuinely want to get you the best rate, so just tell us what we need to know, nothing more. Edit. For some reason, people in the comments are accusing me of enabling fraud. Fraud is terrible and stupid. Don't lie in your answers. Be upfront and honest when answering the questions we ask. Just avoid going off on tangents or sharing irrelevant details. Story 20. In Microsoft Word, you can upload recorded interviews, and it will automatically transcribe them, even distinguishing between Speaker 1, Speaker 2, Speaker 3, and so on. This basically eliminates a huge, annoying part of the job. Edit. You do need to be subscribed to Microsoft Office. Once you're in Word, click the Dictate button, and Dictate and Transcribe should pop up. Click on Transcribe. Yes, it's not perfect, but for a reporter who spends all day transcribing, which is honestly the worst part of the job, this has truly changed my life. Story 21. I'm a dentist, and here's the deal with toothpaste. As long as it contains fluoride, they're all essentially the same. When I was in dental school, a rep from Colgate came by and told us that every product labeled as Colgate Total is exactly the same. The only difference is the packaging. So whether it says whitening, gum protection, or whatever else, it's all the same formula. The only exception is sensitivity toothpaste, which typically contains an extra active ingredient, KNO3, to help with sensitivity. Don't feel pressured to buy expensive toothpaste thinking it's better for your teeth. Just choose whichever one you like the most. Story 22. Library worker here. Most of the donations we receive don't make it to our shelves, no matter how much you insist they should. The reason is that we only add items to the collection that we believe will circulate, get checked out. Many libraries rely on funding based on circulation statistics, so we don't want to use valuable shelf space for items that won't improve those stats. Unless the donated books are brand new or by popular authors, we typically won't add them to the collection. We also regularly remove unpopular items from our collection, much to the dismay of some patrons, for the same reason. These books often end up being sold at book sales to help fund other library programs. Story 23. When you see your loved one at peace in their casket, you might not realize the extensive preparation that goes into their appearance. Beneath their eyelids are plastic eye caps, sometimes glued shut. Wires or sutures are used to hold their mouth together, and cotton and a bit of wax are often placed inside to create that subtle smile. To make the positioning look more natural, there may be a styrofoam block under their back, and more blocks may be placed under the padding to keep their arms in position. In some cases, they might even be wrapped in plastic garments beneath the clothes provided. There's a lot of careful work and smoke and mirrors that go into preparing a decedent. Story 24. Former Uber/Lyft driver here with a couple of things to share. It's not exactly a secret, but there's something people don't always realize. Rideshare drivers do more than just drive. If you're doing it properly, you need to keep track of all your receipts for gas, maintenance, repairs, etc., so you can file your taxes correctly, and some of those expenses are tax deductible. We also have to budget carefully and set aside 30% of our earnings because taxes aren't automatically deducted. Also, you can actually list some of your rideshare skills on a resume. A more disturbing secret is how often I've had to intervene in situations involving sexual assaults in or around my car. I wish rideshare drivers received training on sexual assault and human trafficking awareness, because I've had to protect women from being followed and even chased down the street. We drivers often witness some of the darker sides of humanity, and it can be truly traumatizing. Story 25. If you've had a credit card, student loan, or mortgage for a few years, chances are the current lender or servicer has little to no record of your original paperwork or any real understanding of how your balance was calculated, especially if the loan has been sold multiple times. If they decide to sue you over the loan, it's their responsibility to prove that you have a valid contract with them and the correct balance, which more often than not they can't do. This is because they've been sloppy with record keeping or bought the loan from someone else who did the same. Lenders rely on borrowers to keep making payments without questioning or showing up in court, or simply accepting a judgment when they get sued. Judges are supposed to require the plaintiff to prove their case, even if the defendant doesn't show up, but in many cases, the judge may not thoroughly review the case when the plaintiff has no opposition, and some judges don't even realize they're required to enforce this. While you shouldn't intentionally default on loans you can afford, if you do fall behind, always hire a lawyer to force the lender to prove their case. I've seen people have hundreds of thousands in student debt wiped away or go from the brink of foreclosure to fully owning their homes, and it's not that uncommon. Story 26. I used to work as an Amazon delivery driver, and while this only applies in specific situations, here's something that could help. If you ever get a notification that your package is missing or lost, wait until the end of the day before taking any action. Sometimes, the driver's app will show a package as missing when it's still sitting in the van. The driver can rescan the item and complete the delivery, which will then update on your end. However, some drivers may deliver the package without updating the app, which leads Amazon to believe you never got it. When this happens, you can essentially double dip. Let Amazon believe your package is lost, even though you have it. Amazon will refund you for the item, even though it was delivered. It's a little loophole that takes advantage of Amazon's system. And honestly, Amazon is a massive company that can afford to lose a few million over it. One more thing. Amazon doesn't hold drivers accountable for not following customer delivery notes. For example, if you want your package delivered to your front door, but it ends up in your apartment's office, nothing will happen to the driver. You can complain, but it's unlikely that any action will be taken. Just something to keep in mind. Story 27. Change your dirty furnace filters and clean your AC coils outside. This accounts for about 30% of my calls for no heat or cooling. Edit. Wow, this got more attention than I expected. To clarify, you have two coils, one inside and one outside. Your furnace filter helps keep the inside coil clean, so be sure that filter is in good shape. For the outside coil, first, cut the power to the unit. Then, remove the coil guard and top. Usually requires a 5/16 or 1/4 nut driver and about 20 screws. When cleaning, don't use high-pressure water. Opt for a shower setting and hold the nozzle a few inches away from the coil. Clean from both directions. Afterward, make sure everything is dry before powering the unit back on. Your head pressures will thank you. Edit 2. Oh, and don't forget to blow out your condensate line more often than your husband. This helps prevent water from backing up into the unit due to a clog. Story 28. Years ago, the EU required cigarette manufacturers to reduce the nicotine content in their products. The manufacturers were initially perplexed, wondering how they could extract a naturally occurring substance from a plant. The solution was surprisingly clever. They began treating the tobacco during production with liquid nitrogen. This process effectively doubles the volume of the tobacco, meaning less tobacco is needed to fill a cigarette, which in turn reduces the nicotine content. Ironically, this EU regulation ended up boosting the tobacco industry's profits significantly. Story 29. I work at a university, and while I'm not an academic advisor, I assist various departments in helping students graduate when it's unclear whether they've met all the requirements. Here's a little industry secret. Most of you really don't know what you want to do when you start college. The ones who say they do are often influenced by their parents. Go into IT and make a lot of money. But they don't truly know what they'd enjoy doing. So, don't feel bad or think you're failing if you change your major. It means you explored different options and found something that suits you better. In fact, research shows that students who change majors tend to perform better, on average, than those who stick with their initial choice. This really shouldn't be a secret, but it's something many students don't realize. Story 30. I worked at a department store photography studio owned by a well-known photography company, the kind that likely took your school yearbook photos. The company also partners with a popular online photo ordering website. You might notice how quickly we scribble down a price, cross it out, and write a new one as part of the deal. That's not us doing math on the fly. We've just got it memorized because almost everyone who walks in has that 40% off coupon. Don't come in without a coupon. There's always one available on the website. If you end up paying for sitting fees, it's because you didn't bother to check. Honestly, don't buy the photos in-store. If you just do the session and say you'll buy them later online through the partnered site, it'll be way cheaper than buying them in-store that day. Even if they try to tell you, you won't get this deal online. If you do decide to buy in studio, just get the digital CD of your photos. You'll get all the pictures instead of having to pick only 3 to 4. Plus, it's way cheaper to take that CD to a photo kiosk and print them yourself. Please, don't spend $400 on a few photos you can't even legally copy when you could have spent $80 on a CD of all the photos with full copyright rights. Story 31. As a software developer, I've seen firsthand that many big companies are barely keeping up with technology. For them, innovation is like saying, let's upgrade our core systems from Windows XP to Vista in 2020. As a consultant, I no longer trust large companies with my identity or money. The state of their on-premise hardware and software is a ticking time bomb waiting to go off. Sure, there might be a few teams using the latest stable tech, but they're usually trying to integrate that on top of outdated systems, which results in bottlenecks. More often than not, the solution is to wring out the last bit of performance from a system rather than doing a proper migration. In most cases, It'll take at least 5 to 10 years before we've fully exhausted the old systems and can start addressing the real issues. Story 32. I'm a massage therapist, and the biggest secret I can share is that stretching, when done properly, can eliminate about 90% of your muscle problems. The issue is that most people aren't taught how to stretch properly. The best stretches are the simple ones you learned in middle school. Hold still, count to 10, take deep breaths, and move on. Here's a bit more info. The whole point of stretching is to do the opposite movement of the muscle when it's in use. Stretching not only alleviates pain, but also helps bring circulation to the area and regulates the muscle's basic systems. Here's the rule. If something hurts, don't stretch that specific area. Instead, find the opposite muscle and stretch that one. The body works like a giant game of tug-of-war, where muscles control the movement of bones and help with posture. None of us have perfect posture, but stretching ensures that the tug-of-war stays balanced, keeping your bones in place as close to perfect posture as possible. This way, bones and ligaments don't take damage from gravity or other forces affecting your body throughout the day. However, if you've had injuries like broken bones, torn ligaments, or dislocations, that pain will never fully go away. It will dissipate and become more tolerable, but it won't disappear. The body can't fully correct something that's been broken. This info should help you find stretches on your own online, but I might just need to create a YouTube channel. The key is thinking opposites. If your back hurts, stretch your chest and core. If the front of your legs hurts, stretch the back. If your arms hurt, stretch the opposite side. You'll notice that the side that doesn't hurt will feel tighter when you stretch it. If I make a YouTube channel, I'll post the link here in the comments. Good luck. Story 33. I work as an accessibility consultant, and there's a common misconception that making buildings accessible is an expense with no real return. People think, if I build a ramp, it's going to cost me money, or if I install an automatic door, it's an extra cost. However, studies and real-life examples show that the return on investment is often much greater than the initial expense. By making your office or business more accessible, you open the door to hiring people with disabilities who tend to have lower absenteeism and turnover rates. This can save your business money on training and time lost. Plus, when your business is accessible, customers are more likely to return and recommend your business to others. And if you, a customer, or an employee happens to experience a disabling condition, making your space accessible allows them to continue coming back. It's a secret that really isn't a secret at all, yet people act like it is. Nearly every client I've worked with who has made accessibility improvements ends up loving the changes. They also attract new customers like seniors who benefit from the enhancements as well. Story 34. I work in the blood industry for medical, research, and manufacturing use. When you donate, your red blood cells and most of your platelets are used for medical purposes. However, about 85% of the plasma you donate is actually sold to makeup companies and other manufacturers. Around 20% of platelets are also sold to manufacturers. Your white blood cells, on the other hand, are either sold for research or discarded, as they aren't typically used for medical or manufacturing purposes. In total, about 50% of your blood goes toward treatments, while the rest is directed to makeup, manufacturing, and research companies. I'm not suggesting you shouldn't donate. It still helps people, but it's something many don't think about when that needle is in your arm. Story 35. You're veterinarian. When your pets are hospitalized or need to stay at the clinic, unless they're aggressive, need to be monitored very carefully, or were absolutely slammed, they are constantly getting positive attention from the staff. I've had kennel attendants and techs cuddle up with patients on their breaks. Myself and colleagues have made phone calls or typed up records while holding on to your pets. We routinely talk about how cute the patients are. In fact, it's a running joke that we would get fired immediately if we worked in human medicine, etc. And we do get attached to your pets. We know that your pet got into your weed, and we truly don't care. Seriously, just be honest. We operate on a triage basis. Sicker things are seen first, regardless of how long others have been waiting. If you're a crappy person and you're constantly up front complaining to staff about the wait times / the decor / why there isn't enough staff, being difficult in other ways, being dismissive to the non-doctors, and your pet is stable and has been triaged similarly to another pet that came in around the same time, we're not picking up your file until we have to. So much of my job involves giving bad news, talking to emotional people who often take out their feelings on those around them, and having to defend the costs of emergency care and surgery, that I'm not going to eagerly jump into taking a file for someone who's being difficult before they've even been spoken to. Story 36. Starbucks, Subway, Chipotle, Taco Bell, and probably other fast casual chains all have extremely strict standards for uniformity. Every drink and meal is supposed to look and taste exactly the same no matter where you go. That's the bad news. The good news is, most of us don't care what corporate says. We're the ones making sure that 16 olive slices or 9 caramel ribbons don't count as extra, and we happily give you way more than we're technically allowed to serve. We do this out of instinct, and sometimes out of spite for the fact that we can't even pay our rent. We almost all agree, screw the system, here's an extra McNugget for you. So, if you ever get a meal or drink that's lighter on the good stuff than you expected, it's probably not because the employee was lazy. It's more likely that you got served by one of those perfect employees who sticks to corporate standards and measures everything exactly. Calling to complain doesn't do much. You're probably snitching on the person who never breaks the rules and is just being a kiss-up. And if you point at another employee and say, "But he did it for me last time," you're just being a narc. So, stop being a jerk and enjoy your secret decaf espresso or light nacho cheese. Story 37. I don't work in the industry anymore, but here's a tip. Negotiate the price of your new car before you tell the dealer about your trade-in. If they ask if you want to trade in the car you came in with, say no. If you mention your trade-in too early, the sales manager is already on the phone with a used car sales contact, figuring out how much they can get for your old car. This gives them insight into how much extra room they have to work with on top of the new car's profit margin. Negotiate the price of the new car first, and once you're happy with that, then bring up the trade-in. Most people focus on getting a higher price for their old car because it's in great shape, low mileage, etc. But dealers usually just cut that into the new car's price. Ask for the on-the-road price, which includes everything. It's the total amount you'll pay when you drive off the lot. Don't pay a documentation fee or sticker fee. If they insist on charging you, negotiate for that to be taken off the car's price. Also, don't buy a car on your first visit to the dealership. Get all the info, sleep on it, and make an informed decision. A good salesman will call you the next day, 3 days after, and even a week later if they're doing their job right. If you shop toward the end of the month, you can usually get a better deal since salespeople are trying to hit quotas to earn bonuses, and getting a car out of inventory makes room for new stock. Story 38. I worked in jewelry retail for 5 years, and here's the deal. 90% of what corporate or upper management says is completely impractical in the real world. Most of the time, we just tell them what they wanted to hear and do what actually worked. You can't make sales if no one walks into the store, but you're not allowed to say that. Everything is coded in retail, so if sales are down due to low traffic, you have to say something like, "Our area of opportunity is driving business by increasing customer outreach." It's all a load of crap. Customer outreach usually meant 1 or 2 extra people a week coming in to get their rings cleaned, hours of calling for little to no benefit, and sometimes it just annoyed customers. We were also told to push a specific, rigid line at a certain point in the sale. It might have sounded good on paper or during corporate role plays, but in reality, it never worked in a live sales situation. Sales are about tailoring the experience to the person in front of you. Sticking to scripts only gets you so far. And then there were the credit card quotas. Corporate would threaten our jobs if we didn't hit them, but when employees got too pushy and broke regulations, the company would get sued and back off credit until the next year. It was an endless cycle, and honestly, the credit pitch stayed exactly the same throughout. The real secret in retail: field employees typically have a deep disdain for corporate. Story 39. IT certification companies that promise to help you land a well-paid IT job while you work your day job are selling you an empty dream. I worked in sales, and not a single person I or my team convinced to buy these expensive courses ever landed an IT job. Well, almost no one. There was one case where the company actually got a student a job, but it was with us. Eventually, after delivering the sales pitch to prospective clients, I just started saying, "Now ask me how many people we've helped find jobs." I got fired when management listened to tapes of my calls. Honestly, it was the best thing they ever did for me. Most people never finished the courses because they were too tired after work, but the company knew that and kept selling them anyway. Story 40. Cruise ship crew members are grossly underpaid and overworked, to the point where it would be illegal in most wealthy countries. Here's why. I worked for a company that serviced cruise ships while they were docked on shore. The crew members on the ships, who travel with the ship, are typically from developing countries and are paid far below the standards that would be acceptable in places like Canada or the US. In fact, their wages would likely fall below minimum wage in these countries. How do companies get away with this? Flags of convenience. Just like cars can have different license plates from various provinces or states, ships must also be registered in a specific jurisdiction. But because there are no strict regulations about a ship actually being from its registered country, companies register their ships in nations with relaxed labor laws. This allows them to follow those countries' rules rather than the labor laws of where they operate. The crew endures these conditions because, while their pay is low by Western standards, it's often a significant amount in their home countries. By working on a cruise ship for a few years, they can save enough money to send their children to school or buy a house back home. So they put up with it. This is why you'll often see ships registered in places like Panama City or Nassau on the back of the ship, even though the company might be based in Florida, and the ship has never even visited its home port. Story 41. RealPage is a company that offers software enabling landlords to share proprietary information, with the primary goal of gradually increasing rents across the board. Think this violates antitrust laws? You're right. RealPage has been the subject of an ongoing class action lawsuit, with some of the largest landlords using its services, like Greystar and Pinnacle, named as defendants. The creator of the software originally developed it for the airline industry. After the Supreme Court ruled it illegal, he pivoted to the rental industry, where he's been operating without consequence ever since. This practice has been in place for over 20 years, coinciding with the steep rise in rent prices. It has contributed to the financial strain on everything from home ownership and utilities to food costs. If more of your income is going toward rent, you have less to spend on everything else. This software is a key factor in why rent prices are so high. Landlords using it form a cartel. Story 42. In my country, many small-town doctors tell patients that a blood pressure of 160/90 or blood sugar levels of 250 to 300 are acceptable. Why? Because if they say otherwise, the patient might think the doctor is just pushing pills and will go doctor shopping until they find someone who agrees that these numbers are normal for their body, which is absurd. When these patients inevitably end up in a hospital in the city with complications, they argue with us when we tell them they need to better manage their health, as they've been misled by their family doctor. Many patients seek advice from senior doctors, but these so-called experts often make more mistakes than a newly graduated doctor from a reputable institution. Why? Because they've stopped staying updated, lost the curiosity needed for accurate diagnosis, or are overwhelmed by the sheer number of patients they try to see in a day. This leads them to overlook significant, though seemingly minor, clinical signs or lab results, and avoid doing in-depth work in case they have to refer to a specialist. Story 43. Mortgage application tips from an underwriter. When applying for a mortgage, especially through a broker, who should be guiding you properly, so make sure they know their stuff. Don't provide more documentation than necessary. I've underwritten so many loans that had to be denied because applicants disclosed new debts just to be transparent. I appreciate your honesty, but now you've made my job harder. Once I see that new debt, I can't ignore it. Do not, under any circumstances, pay off a car lease. A car loan can be excluded from your debt-to-income ratio, but auto leases can't be. The nature of a lease means you're expected to enter a new one, so paying it off early doesn't help. I've seen borrowers pay off a $6,000 plus lease early, only to realize it still counts, and they gained nothing from paying it off ahead of time. If you're planning to open a credit card at a store, like IKEA, Home Depot, etc., for furniture or appliances, do that after your credit report is pulled. Once the credit line is opened, the monthly payment has to be factored into your debt-to-income ratio. However, if it's not showing on your credit report, say it's listed on your asset statements, in certain cases we might be able to disregard it as non-risky debt. This generally only works if it's not a fixed loan, like an auto loan. Don't move money around in the 2 months leading up to your mortgage application. Keep your funds in one account for at least 2 months before applying. Don't deposit anything over 50% of your monthly income into the account during this time. Fannie Mae requires 2 months of bank statements, and Freddie Mac needs 1, but loans can flip between the two. If you deposit, say, $20,000 in June and move it to another account in July, I'll need to see statements for both accounts. If there are any other large deposits in either account, I may need to track those as well. Large deposits, anything over 50% of your monthly income, have to be verified to ensure it's legitimate. Just because you see $20,000 go in and then $20,000 go out doesn't mean it's the same money. I need proof, like wire transfers. The analogy I use is, if you pour a bucket of water into a pool, then scoop out a bucket later, how can I be sure it's the exact same water? I need to verify that the money coming out is the same good money that went in. Story 44. Just because a plant product, like fruits and vegetables, is labeled as organic doesn't mean it's free from sprays, like pesticides or herbicides. It simply means the product is restricted to using organic-grade sprays, which are more expensive but can still cause harm if misused. Similarly, a non-GMO label on food doesn't carry much weight because it's not a legal requirement. While the FDA does define what qualifies as a GMO plant, the non-GMO sticker is voluntary and often used as a marketing tool. Companies aren't held to strict standards when labeling products as non-GMO. So many brands use it to attract consumers, with no real downside. In short, it's important to educate yourself about these labels and what they truly mean before jumping to conclusions. Story 45. Grocery store employee here. Just gonna share a few things most people don't know. Yes, there are rats. The conveyor belts? They probably have dried chicken juice on them 99% of the time. Anything that the customer doesn't directly inspect doesn't get cleaned unless the health department demands it. Cashiers have the power to bend the rules for you, but if they don't, it's likely because you were rude or annoying. Also, bringing more than 15 items through self-checkout? Everyone hates that. When you say you accidentally put the peanuts code on the bulk pine nuts, we know you did it on purpose. You're not fooling anyone. Loss prevention? They're usually guys who either enjoy hurting people or wanted to be cops but couldn't cut it. If you steal something and resist them, they'll gladly use any excuse to slam you into the Coinstar machine. They have a muzzle for biters and keep any weapons they confiscate. Big chain store managers make $200,000 plus a year. My store does $300,000 in sales every day, so if you leave because we wouldn't accept your expired coupon, we honestly don't care. Your departure won't even register in our numbers. And there's no warehouse with extra stock. Every night, we get 3 Swift trucks, and the freight crew puts everything on the shelves. If you're a WIC recipient and are rude to us, we can contact the WIC office and potentially have your benefits revoked. Oh, and if you hide things you don't want in random shelves, instead of giving them to an employee or, God forbid, putting them back yourself, we will gather in a graveyard that night to perform a ritual and curse your entire family with a terrible pox. It hasn't worked yet, but we're getting better at it. Just so you know. Story 46. When it comes to DUI investigations, or whatever your state calls drunk driving, there are only 3 standardized tests that are officially recognized to determine alcohol intoxication. The horizontal gaze nystagmus, following a finger with your eyes, the one-leg stand, and the walk-and-turn test. If an officer asks you to do things like recite the alphabet backwards or touch your finger to your nose, those tests are completely unnecessary and unreasonable. Also, keep in mind that these tests are 100% voluntary in all 50 states. Refusing to take them is not an admission of guilt, but agreeing to them only gives more evidence that could be used against you in court. Not a lawyer, but I did work as a deputy sheriff for several years. Bottom line, don't drive drunk, but also make sure you know your rights. Story 47. The way company hierarchies are structured often allows the higher-ups to protect themselves by scapegoating lower-level employees when something goes wrong, especially when the lower levels are trained to carry out questionable practices. I saw this happening in 2 organizations that handled addiction and mental health services. The hierarchy was generally set up like this: top, doctors/psychiatrists; middle, counselors; bottom, caseworkers. Supervisors would train caseworkers to engage in fraudulent practices without explicitly telling them it was fraud. This allowed the companies to collect large sums of money from insurance companies. However, when the insurance companies conducted audits and uncovered the fraud, the company would disown the employee, claiming they didn't train them that way, and fire them immediately. Additionally, Caseworkers were often responsible for scheduling appointments with counselors and psychiatrists. However, in many cases, these higher-level professionals would neither make the calls nor attend the appointments, but would still document the appointment and charge for it. If a caseworker tried to address this issue, the upper levels would target them, finding reasons to fire them eventually. Doctors and counselors would often protect themselves by claiming they did hold the appointment, but the patient likely didn't remember due to their symptoms. Story 48. As a commercial real estate lender, I can tell you that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are government-backed entities, meaning taxpayer-backed, that inject liquidity into the real estate lending market. While most of their activity focuses on residential loans to promote homeownership, which is well known, what's less commonly discussed is that they also issue about $100 billion in apartment loans each year. These loans go to wealthy investors, including one of the largest landlords in the country, who owns over 30,000 units and is worth $60 billion, earning around $1.25 billion annually in free cash flow. The interest rates these investors receive on multifamily loans are shockingly low, often as much as 0.5% lower than what other lenders offer, which makes it impossible for anyone else to compete. In essence, taxpayers are backing loans for the super wealthy at extremely favorable rates, allowing them to generate far more wealth than they would in a truly free market system. The reality is the U.S. is already operating in a form of socialism. It's just that the benefits go overwhelmingly to the wealthy. Story 49. The places you put your parents, even the more expensive ones. Independent and assisted living. Most are owned by investors who really don't care about your loved ones, especially the larger corporate ones with multiple units in different states. Some people are paying thousands per month for the bare minimum of care and facilities. The crap I see and hear will make your skin crawl. Story 50. The stuff that makes movie theater popcorn taste like movie theater popcorn is called Flavacol. It's a salt-like additive that you can buy yourself and add to your popcorn at home. A carton lasts forever because you only need like a teaspoon of Flavacol per cup of kernels, and it's indistinguishable from the popcorn you get at the movies. Story 51. I'm repair tech at Chuck E. Cheese. There are some games we can adjust the payout for, and some we can't. We have a number called ticket per play, or ticket per tap, that we have to try to maintain. Every game and ride is adjusted somehow, so we can get to that average number. The length of the ride is so you will tap your card more or less times. Some games have fixed ticket payout we can't adjust, so we adjust other games up or down to get the whole average to that magical number. If one game we can't change pays out 4 tickets on average, and the number we want to reach is 6, for instance, I would adjust another game that can be adjusted to 7 or 8 to compensate, because the boss only cares about the average payout on a whole, not on the individual games, unless it's insanely high or low. If a game is cheating you out of tickets, we probably did that on purpose to compensate for something else. This also goes for the claw machine. We can control how often it pays out. Tickets can be bought at 1 penny per ticket. If you drop a quarter into a token machine, if it doesn't pay you 25 tickets, you're better off just buying tickets. No, we don't reuse pizza. It's cheaper and easier to just make another one since we get the ingredients in bulk. It's just that we cut into smaller slices, so it's harder to do right, plus the kitchen personnel usually doesn't care about making it look perfect. No, the job isn't fun. My job is to make sure you have fun. My job is stressful. Story 52. I worked for FedEx Trade Networks clearing customs shipments, and almost anyone purchasing items over $800 or stuff from China and a few other countries has to provide what's called a 5106. A 5106 is a form used by the U.S. government for duties and tax purposes, but on it, you need to provide either a Social Security number or EIN. When we switched to remote work in 2021, I was working from home, and on my work computer, I had access to hundreds of Social Security numbers, addresses, names, basically all the info someone would need to steal identities, and no one knew I had access to this. But here's the real kicker. This was an entry-level position, and anyone could get hired for it, with full access to this sensitive data. If you're importing items personally from overseas and need to provide a 5106, you're better off setting up an LLC. That way, you avoid the very real risk of some careless FedEx employee snapping a photo of your 5106 form with their phone. Story 53. Expiration dates on food, particularly shelf-stable items, are largely arbitrary. Nutrition labels are often highly inaccurate. While it's technically illegal to provide false information, enforcement is rare unless health claims are involved. The food certifications you see on labels come from for-profit organizations that charge companies monthly fees. These certifiers are motivated to approve as many companies as possible and often overlook violations. A surprisingly large number of ingredients that are banned or heavily regulated in other developed countries are freely allowed and mostly unregulated in the US. The same companies that produce high-end store brands for places like Wegmans and Whole Foods also produce the store brands for discount retailers like Walmart and Aldi. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Story 54. With recent advancements in lab-grown diamonds, even the most skilled gemologists can hardly tell them apart from mined diamonds. There's no need to spend extra money on real diamonds anymore. ETA. Yes, most, if not all, lab-grown diamonds have an inscription, which is how a jeweler can differentiate them. However, these inscriptions are very small and can be hard to spot right away. From a quality perspective, it's tough to tell the difference, and lab-grown diamonds tend to have better clarity, color, and cut. If a jeweler can't tell without a loupe, the average person certainly can't. Also, lab-grown diamonds don't have the bright blue fire that moissanites exhibit, which makes them easy to identify. For context, I worked at a jewelry store for years with a very experienced gemologist/goldsmith who has confirmed all of this. I've also received extensive diamond and jewelry training. So, this isn't just some random opinion, it's based on real experience. Story 55. Veterinarian here. Most, if not all, of the supplements you buy for your pet, whether it's anti-anxiety products, special diets, vitamins, or even CBD, are basically a waste of money. They're all just marketing gimmicks from companies with big budgets and zero accountability. There are so many ads and ploys out there pushing these products that don't actually work. As for those fancy boutique food brands that pop up and disappear in a few years, more expensive food doesn't automatically mean better quality. Here's an important fact. Dogs need grains in their diet. Grain-free diets are actually harmful. The grains are replaced with legumes, which block an amino acid that's crucial for heart health. Dogs on grain-free diets that develop heart disease often see improvements when switched to a normal diet. A lot of food companies claim they have veterinary nutritionists overseeing their formulas. But here's the catch. There are only 14 veterinary nutritionists in the entire US. Feeding raw food? That's a recipe for disaster. Raw diets are linked to serious health issues like hemorrhagic gastroenteritis caused by salmonella or listeria poisoning. These diets are not safe for any breed or condition. Your dog isn't a wild wolf. And no, your dog isn't sad about eating the same food every day. That's just more marketing nonsense. The feeding guidelines on food bags are based on the maximum caloric needs of an active, intact working male dog. This is designed to sell more food. If you're following the bag's guidelines, cut that number by 25% to avoid obesity. Just to clarify, I'm not paid by big manufacturers like Purina or Hills, and my education wasn't funded by them either. I recommend these brands because they're reliable, they employ actual nutritionists, conduct research, even if it's biased, and have a reputation to maintain. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.